When it comes to DNA ancestry testing, we usually know our results will reveal a mix of heritage from various countries and regions. For example, this test shows that one of my ancestors was from Scandinavia, another from Western Europe, while another is from the British Isles. But what if your test results show that you have no European ancestry at all? What if they show that you are 100% Asian? Well, for one Spanish-speaking ethnic group, this is their reality. This is the story of the Basques and their mysterious origins. The Basques are an ethnic group who primarily live in the Pyrenees Mountains along the border of Spain and France. They speak a language isolate known as Basque, which is not related to any other living language on Earth. And they have a unique culture with distinct customs and traditions that set them apart from neighboring Spanish and French communities. The most striking thing about the Basques is perhaps their physical appearance, which has often been described as exotic and even Mongolian. Even though they live in Western Europe, surveys show that they look Asian more than they look Hispanic or Caucasian. And even though they've lived in Europe for thousands of years, when you dig deeper into their DNA, it turns out that they have no European ancestry whatsoever. According to mainstream scientists, the Basques all descend from three main ancestral sources. Two of these sources are from Asia, while the third is from what is today North Africa. This means that the Basques are 100% non-European. So how did they end up living in Europe? How did they end up looking so different from everyone around them? And why have they retained so much of their Asian appearance even after living in Europe for thousands of years? Well, the first Europeans to make contact with the Basques were the ancient Greeks. When the Greek explorer Pytheas arrived in the region of Aquitaine in the 4th century BC, he reported being astonished by the appearance of the local people. He wrote that they had small eyes and black hair, just like the Indians. The Romans who later conquered the region would also make note of the Basques' dark features. In his book, The Geography, Strabo described the Aquitanians as swarthy and short of stature, traits that are commonly associated with Asians. According to Arab historians, medieval Muslim scholars would get so caught up in stories of the strange people in the mountains that some of them began to think the Basques were actually Indians. One historian wrote that they looked like the Indians because they had the same color of skin, the same face, and the same eyes. And this idea persisted well into modern times. As recently as the 19th century, the French writer Pierre Loti would say of the Basques that they looked as though they came from the Caucasus or from India. But this wasn't just idle curiosity on the part of outsiders. It was in fact a source of great pride for the Basques themselves. For centuries, the Basques believed that they descended from the mythical Vassos, a people who came from the east to teach them the arts of civilization. Unfortunately, there's very little information on the Vassos. The earliest mention of them that I could find was from the 12th century Arab historian al-Idrisi, who said that the Basque country was inhabited by a people called Vassos. But exactly where he got this name from, or what he meant by Vasses, remains a mystery. And despite the efforts of Basque scholars, no definitive connection between the Basques and the Vassos has ever been established. Some researchers have speculated that the word Vasco is derived from the Sanskrit word Vasu, meaning divine or celestial. And considering that the Basques have preserved many of their Asian physical traits over the centuries, perhaps this is a hint that their mythical ancestors really did come from Asia. But regardless of where they came from, the Basques have been living in the mountains of Europe for thousands of years. In fact, they may have been the first inhabitants of the continent. One theory claims that the Basques were the original people of Europe, having migrated from Asia via the Caucasus Mountains during the last ice age, or sans. An alternative theory holds that the Basques were brought to Europe from Asia, specifically as slaves. But whatever their origins, the Basques clearly have been here for thousands of years. Ancient burial sites have revealed that the Basques practiced burial rituals that were unheard of among other Europeans at the time. Instead of burying their dead, the Basques would put their loved ones in stone chambers and cover them with large boulders. And some of these tombs date back 5,000 years. Meanwhile, Basque cave paintings that date back 3,500 years show people with dark slanted eyes and other distinctly Asian features. It is true that over the centuries, the Basques have intermixed with other Europeans. But despite this, genetic studies show that they still retain a significant amount of their Asian ancestry. A study published in 2013 found that the Basques carry 3% of their DNA from East Asia, 3% from North Africa, and 94% from Europe. However, the European percentage does not represent modern Europeans. Rather, it represents Neolithic Europeans from 7,000 years ago. This is the genetic makeup of the ancient people of Europe before the arrival of modern humans from the East. This raises two possibilities. Either the Basques inherited this Asian DNA directly from the ancient people of Europe, meaning they only mixed with Europeans after this population died out, or the Basques and the ancient people of Europe both descend from the same ancestral population in Asia, meaning the Basques didn't have to migrate to Europe because Europe was already their home. Now, mainstream scientists disagree with both of these possibilities. They claim that the Basques' Asian ancestry must have come from later migrations. However, this is difficult to explain since it doesn't account for the presence of Asian DNA in ancient Europeans. In addition, the Basques have no oral histories, place names, myths, or archaeological finds that can shed light on these migrations. And on top of this, the rest of Europe shows no signs that it was ever populated by Asians, so this leaves us with more questions than answers. While mainstream scientists have come up with explanations for the Basques' Asian ancestry, none of these are supported by hard evidence. One popular theory holds that the Basques' Asian features resulted from the slave trade, specifically that the Basques were kidnapped by seafarers from the Middle East and sold to Europeans as slaves. However, there is zero evidence to support this claim. No written records, no skeletal remains, and no DNA studies prove that the Basques were ever enslaved by seafarers from the Middle East. Another theory blames the Black Death, which ravaged Europe in the 14th century. This theory claims that the Black Death wiped out most of the Basques' European ancestry, forcing them to reproduce with each other and become inbred. But again, there is no evidence to support this. Other theories exist, but none of them are supported by evidence. In fact, the only piece of evidence we have seems to point to the opposite conclusion, namely that the Basques' Asian ancestry goes back thousands of years. And what's most intriguing is that the Basques aren't the only people in Europe with Asian ancestry. The Sardinians, for instance, also show signs that they descend from an ancient Asian population. And what's most fascinating is that the Sardinians and the Basques seem to share many physical traits. Both groups have dark hair and dark eyes. And according to some accounts, both groups have slanted eyes and high cheekbones. Now, this whole situation is very puzzling. Here we have two separate ethnic groups who live hundreds of miles apart with many of the same physical traits. And yet mainstream science sees them as completely unrelated. To me, this is much more than just a scientific mystery. I believe it reveals a dark secret of human history, namely that the people of Europe were once replaced by a new race of humans coming from the East. Today, we generally accept that all humans originated in Africa. But what if major events in human history have been erased and lost forever? What if there are gaps in our understanding of human prehistory that conventional science refuses to acknowledge? For instance, consider the fact that we don't know how and why humans developed the ability to speak. Scientists understand that speech played a crucial role in the development of human society, yet they cannot agree on how speech evolved. Some argue that humans inherited the ability to speak from Neanderthals, while others argue that they simply evolved naturally. But the truth is, we don't know. We also don't know why anatomically modern humans suddenly appeared in the fossil record 300,000 years ago, or why humans began to develop larger brains 2 million years ago, or why the human species began to spread throughout the world 70,000 years ago. All of these events are simply too big and too important to have happened without a reason. Yet mainstream science simply brushes them aside as natural processes. Could it be that there are parts of our history that science is intentionally ignoring? Could it be that there are things happening in our past that are too controversial to be discussed? After all, if the current narrative of human history were to be proven wrong, it would turn our understanding of history on its head. It would mean that our ancestors were far more advanced than we thought, and it would mean that our so-called primitive ancestors were in fact capable of incredible feats of technology. For example, a recent discovery in South Africa suggests that humans may have used sophisticated tools 700,000 years ago. This is an incredibly long time before the emergence of modern humans and the beginning of the Stone Age. But what's even more fascinating is that the tools were discovered at a site known as Isimila, and 25 miles away from there, another group of humans was using sophisticated tools 1.3 million years ago. Could it be that human evolution was far more rapid than we think? Could it be that the gap between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens was bridged in less than 500,000 years? Or could it be that Homo sapiens really is a misnomer, that we are actually a hybrid species that descends from an unknown hominid with a much higher level of technology? Today, science dismisses discoveries like these as random occurrences. But what if the truth is much more sinister? What if the history of the Basques and other European populations has been deliberately hidden from us and passed down through oral tradition instead? This might explain why science has failed to come up with conclusive answers. Perhaps the truth is that the Basques and other Europeans are not 100% non-European. Perhaps the truth is that the Basques descend from a highly advanced race of humans who existed thousands of years ago. And perhaps the truth is that this race of humans migrated from Asia to Europe and replaced the primitive humans who were living there at the time. Before you go, make sure to check out this video on the real reason that Jesus came to Earth.